Morph containers are a new way to edit and manage morph maps in MODO. So a morph map, if you don't know, is created by selecting a prim and then going into the vertex map list and saying create a new morph map. This is the old workflow. If you wanted to have morphs on each item, you'd have to go to each one individually and add that morph map. Now what you can do, though, is you can create a morph container, which is an item that stores morph map information. So if I hit create morph container, I can drag this here into my schematic. Now what I can do is I can say, all right, I'm going to grab my cone. I'm going to go to my vertice mode. I'm going to select the vertices I want to be in the morph map. Control click on the morph container and then hit add points. As soon as I do, you'll see under the cone in the vertex map list, you'll see that there is a morph container. Now this works like any other morph. So let me make sure that my deformers are off, and they are. All right, so now I'm going to move these points. So let's do this actually. Let's set up a linear fall off, and we're gonna sit here. I'm gonna reverse its direction and grab our move tool, and then we'll move it up. So now what I've done is I've created a morph map. If I deselect the morph container, you'll see that it goes away. Clear my fall off, right? So now if I, in the old days, what you would do is you'd say, okay, cool, now I've got to go and I've got to select my cube and I've got to make a new morph map, so on and so forth. But now with morph containers, what I can say is I'm going to go to my cube, I'm going to grab the vertices here. I'm going to select my morph container. You see when I do that it fires the morph that's there. I'm going to add points to it, and I'm going to do the same thing. So let me bring up my fall off, and let's actually move it in the right direction. So we will put this down here, and we'll go with this. Bring up our move tool, and we'll move it up. All right, same thing. You do the thing with the sphere. So I go to my sphere, I grab the vertices, select my morph container, add points. Now what I've done is I've linked all of these guys together. So now if I move this up, I have, clear my fall off, I have a single morph container that is adding morph information on all these different items. You can imagine as even just a modeling tool, if I wanted to, I could have all these morph containers in my scene ready to go. And if I add more geometry into the scene, I can add, well, let's just do that. So if I go here and let's add a cylinder. I've added my cylinder and like, gosh, I really want to add this to my morph container. I go into my vertex mode. I'm going to grab this, select my morph container, go back to our setup deformers and hit add points. And there you go. Now I have a morph map that's in here. And if I deselect it, it goes away. And just like regular morph maps, all this information is stored on the vertex level. So if I grab these points here, say I really want my cylinder to start out here in this, that was a modeling operation because my morph map wasn't selected. If I go here, all the offsets are always stored because they're at the vertex level. They're not at the item level. All right, so this is in its essence what a morph container does, which is it abstracts the idea of a morph map away from the mesh. Mesh independence, very much like a weight container, allows for a lot of really cool things. So let's say that we go here, and I want my cylinder in this, but I have right now a morph influence. Let me turn on my deformers again. So with this, if I wire in, say, this lift morph, now if I grab this guy and I adjust its strength channel, oops, let's not enact polygon slice, let's be out of component mode there. Do this. Now I'm animating this morph, and this morph data, the morph map, is added by this single lift morph container, meaning instead of having to manage multiple maps or having multiple morph influences, I can have a single morph influence and a single morph container that goes out to multiple items or mesh items that are being controlled by it. It simplifies the rigging quite a bit by allowing you to combine all these things into one thing and have one deformer versus three. Okay, so that gives us this, but there's more coolness to this. So let's say I go here, all right, cool. I can disconnect this and you can see it goes away because now this morph container, sorry, this morph influence, it's got a strength of, 0.555, but there's no data into it. And I have this other morph container here called blocker. This actually has points in it, but nothing is moved. Now check this out. If I go here and say, all right, I'm going to put this morph on there, and then I add this connection as well, and I set its order, what it's done is that these points here are in this blocker, and their morph offset is set to 0. So this idea of adding different morph containers into your morph influence works just like weight containers do with regular general influences. So the morph influences, the morph containers also have a flow, allowing you to have multiple morph maps in place. And if there are points in one that isn't in the other, they will actually pass through each other, allowing you to get this kind of effect. Now, this is just kind of a showing you how the tech works. I can see all kinds of really cool effects for this. But the next and sort of final step for me, and what makes morph containers so powerful, is this idea of mesh independence. So let's go here. So I've created this very rudimentary assembly. So what this is, if I go here, we can see that I have a simple rig set up. This is just 3 joints that rotate. This would be like for an arm or an elbow. And I've got 2 shape corrections built in for the elbow moving in the positive direction and going into the negative direction. Now, what's nice about this is that since I was able to use morph containers, and I use weight containers too, I can create a system that is independent of the mesh that it's going to control. So now I have this rigging assembly that I can add to any piece of geometry I want, and I don't have to set up the relationships between rotation and shape correction. It's already done. All you need to do is add points into the morph container and then do your effect. So let's show this. So I've got this little, box arm thing. I can go to my list of my assemblies, and I can double click and I can add my morph assembly in it, or my morph container assembly. So now what I showed you, I've added to the scene. And very Julia Child style, I'm going to go to the box fit. So here, this shows a scene where I already have the weighting in place. Let's look at it from this angle, right? So I've got my base, I've got my mid, and I've got my little end here. So just like an arm. But what I want to do is I want to add a correction into this. So let's do this. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go, all right, let's look at this. And let's just set it to 90 degrees, since I know that's the level I need. Open this guy up, go to morph containers. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my box, go to vertex mode, and I'm going to go into the mid pos correct morph container. So I'm going to grab these points, and I'm going to say add points. So now I can start making edits to this container, and we'll see it reflected here in the shape. So let me just grab this here, and I'm just going to start making shape changes. So we're just going to do very simple kind of correction here to kind of prove the point. We're going to take this and scoot this up to there. Let's pull this down a little bit there. You know, what you would expect for trying to solve the elbow problem. So just do something. I'm being maybe a little heavy-handed with this to show what it's doing. Why not add a little bit of a bulge, just because, why not? Do this here. Okay, so now if I adjust this down, you'll see that this shape correction is already baked in. And this is the power of what a morph container gives you, especially in a more complex rigging system, is that I was able to set this behavior up, and a fitting TD, or someone who uses my complex system, my rig, all they have to do is add points into weight containers and now create shapes with morph containers, and it will automatically apply the corrections in the right place and at the right magnitude. We've even created the ability to, all right, I want to have a positive and a negative direction. Granted, in an elbow, you certainly would not want to do this if it was your own arm. But I'm going to grab my neg correct. I'm going to grab these points here. I'm going to add the points to them. And same idea. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to kind of clean this up. And let's just pull these shapes out so they're doing something reasonable. And let's tweak this out a little bit there. But now I have a positive and I have a negative shape correction. No need for you to go in and manually do it. No need for you to set anything up. The rig is a self-contained system. And even though this maybe looks a little complex, it's actually quite simple. But you don't ever even need to go into there. You just go here, select the weight containers you want. Sorry, the morph containers you want, and you're off to the races. To illustrate this, I could do the same thing here. I create a same cylinder. I added in this correction, or sorry, this rig. Same idea. Just to illustrate it as two different rigs. Go to my pause correct. I grab these points. Oops, let's actually grab these points. And let's add them into my pause correction. And I'm going to add points, and I'm going to start moving things around, right? You know, a more complex example, which means we can get more interesting shapes out of this thing. We got to deal with the centers and how we want that to be, but you can see what's going on. We're literally creating shapes, and as an artist, I don't have to think about this anymore. I go in, I add the points where I want, and I make my edit. So morph containers are MODO's way of allowing this sort of shape abstraction. It's actually a big part of what makes MODO's rigging system so powerful, is the ability of taking a complex system and doing things or setting things up without the mesh in place. Mesh independent rigging and modeling is actually kind of an interesting idea that MODO does a great job at. So anyway, there's my my totally broken cylinder. Let's adjust this out because I made a mistake wrong. You can see what's going on. So anyway, morph containers in MODO, great stuff.